Welcome, I'm Maureen Connolly, the editor-in-chief of everydayhealth.com and the host of Boxed In, a new series from Everyday Health featuring conversations with the country's top mental health experts, focusing on the impact that COVID-19 pandemic is having on our mental health and well-being. My guest today is Dr. Heidi Horsley. She is an international grief expert, a licensed psychologist and social worker, and she's also the director and the co-founder of the Open to Hope Foundation, one of the largest grief resources with over 2 million yearly visitors. She hosts the award-winning Open to Hope cable television show and podcast, and Dr. Heidi is an adjunct professor at Columbia University. She also recently recovered from her own bout of COVID-19. Dr. Horsley, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Maureen. It's good to be here today.
So you had COVID-19. Tell us what that was like.
I started getting symptoms on March 17th, and a few days later, on March 20th, I went to a COVID-19 testing site and was tested because I had all the symptoms. And then 2 days later, they called me and told me I was positive. I had tested positive for COVID-19 and that I needed to isolate in my bedroom for 2 weeks, which I did. I was in my bedroom for 14 days. And I had the symptoms for about 3.5 weeks, and I today don't have any symptoms. The only thing I have today is I cannot smell or taste anything. Other than that, I'm pretty much symptom free.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that that's one of the side effects of this virus, right? Not being able to taste or smell.
Yes, it's really strange. And you don't realize how much you use smell, especially until you don't have it. So that's been it's been a really strange journey even having it. And then
yes, when you said you had all the symptoms, I mean, I guess we know, but just to sort of talk about what you experienced, was it just awful? Felt like you were run over by a truck, fever, cough?
My symptoms were pretty classic, and I know some of them are different, but I started out getting a cough, and then I started getting achy and chills, and I had a little bit of a sore throat, which some people have. And the fever was the last thing that I got. They wouldn't test me until I had a fever.
Mm-hmm.
So the fever was interesting though, because it would go from 102 to 97 back up to 102 within minutes. And I kept getting new thermometers because I thought they were broken.
Wow.
It didn't stay high very long. And it felt like I had the flu and a cold combined, trouble breathing, very sensitive breathing. I would cough whenever I breathed in, and extremely, extremely exhausted. That's another thing that's kind of hung on. Really, really tired. I would get up in the morning, be up for an hour, and then want to go back to sleep.
Wow. And so you were quarantined in the office that you're in right now, that we see you in? Is that where you stayed?
Yes, I stayed actually in my bedroom.
Okay.
I live in New York City, but I flew out here on March 14th, not realizing that I had the symptoms because I felt fine. And then a couple of days later, I started getting them. So I'm in Arizona right now. So I was in my bedroom. The doctor basically called me from the hospital and said, "You've just tested positive. You need to go into your bedroom or go into a room and isolate from your family for 14 days.
Wow.
I have 2 kids, a 21 and a 15-year-old, and a husband. And so I basically said goodbye from a distance and went into my bedroom for 14 days. And it was scary because I think the biggest thing that's scary about having COVID-19 when you're alone is at night I started to have problems breathing, and it was stressful because I was alone.
So did you text your husband? I mean, I'd be like, I'm feeling scared in here.
Yeah. I would text him and I would call him, and he would leave my food outside the door. And I had gloves on that I would take my food and eat because I was really afraid that, he would get symptoms if I gave him the dishes again. And he actually did get symptoms. I don't know if he had COVID-19 because he'd never got a fever, but he did end up having other symptoms.
Wow.
So it was very strange not to see him, just to text him and call him.
Yeah. And so physically, obviously you were impacted, but tell us what it was like emotionally. What were your moods like being isolated for so long?
I think one of the biggest challenges for me, and what I'm saying is for the clients I know that have struggled with this, is you get into your head and you start getting anxious because you're seeing on the media that people are, you know, in dire straits. They're in hospitals, they're fighting for their life. And you're wondering if you're going to end up in that space, if you're going to end up in that place. So I had to be really careful about not, I would go into these scary places in my head and say, Heidi, get out of there, you know, because I was really working myself up. I think at about day 3, I started getting depressed, and started feeling like, okay, I've got to do what I tell my clients. I have to practice what I preach, because I'm starting to get depressed. I'm isolated in my room and I'm feeling anxious that it's going to get worse.
So what did you tell yourself? What is it that you preach?
I kind of looked at past adversity and how I'd gotten through it, and past losses and how I'd gotten through them. My brother died when I was only 20 in a car accident. He was only 17. He and my cousin died together. They were both 17. And I thought back to those days and said, okay, what did I do that helped? And what can I do now? Because I'm stronger than I think I am. I just have to go back into those parts. And I started setting goals for myself. That's kind of weird. I am in a small room, a small bedroom, and it's like, okay, I've got to start setting goals for myself. I've got to feel like I'm doing something. And one of the things I did when I started feeling like I could, because the first probably 4 days I didn't feel like I could do anything, was I started to walk in my bedroom. And I put a Fitbit on and started to walk 10,000 steps in an 8x10 bedroom. And
Wow.
that really helped, because I was like, okay, I'm doing something and I'm moving my body, because, you know, trauma gets trapped in the body, and I had all these anxious feelings that were in the body. So I knew I had to move my body. So that was helpful. And then after I even got better, I started doing some Zoom yoga classes. There's a lot online. A lot of it's free. That was really helpful also. And I made my bed every day, which was helpful, especially because, you know, at some point I was like, okay, I don't really need to be in bed all day. At the beginning I did. So I'm going to make my bed so I feel like I've accomplished something today. And that sounds really small, but it really helped.
Yeah, what is it about routine for humans? It's so, I guess it's comforting, right? When we know what to expect.
It really is. And I think that's part of the problem right now. Everybody's been knocked out of their routine, you know, and they're sleeping longer. They don't have any purpose oftentimes. They don't have a routine. They don't have, when we're feeling down, anxious, and depressed, if we can move, if we can get up and, you know, bring our kids to school or go to work, or, you know, those kind of things, it helps us to feel better. And right now people aren't doing that. You know, they're sheltered in.
Yeah. And so the work that you've done after 9/11, actually, you worked with a lot of families who suffered tremendous loss. And I understand that some of these families are now in touch with you again because this pandemic has been a trigger of sorts. Can you talk to us about why that is?
Sure, they are. I worked with Firefighter Families for 10 years. They lost someone in the trade center, a firefighter. And what they're contacting me now and saying, Heidi, we're sheltering in. We're seeing thousands of deaths on television. We're feeling the energy of the world and the country. And it's bringing us back to a time after 9/11, you know, where we felt this way. And we have a lot of time to think about the person, to our father that died, or whoever it is that died. In this case, it's a lot of the dads. So we have a lot of time to think about the person that died, and we're missing them. And we're also wondering, if these people that we love were dead, were here right now, how would they help us? What would they say to us? We need them more than ever, because we're sheltering in, we're not in a good place, and they're not here. So, you know, there's a lot of time to think. There's a lot of time to be alone with our thoughts right now. And that can, you know, lead to a lot of grieving again, and getting us into depressive places, actually.
So what is it that you like? How do they work through that?
Um, I think that's a really good question. It's a hard question to answer, but there's many ways to do it. I think that, you know, if you have a therapist, you can call them, connect with people. Governor Cuomo said something which I really liked. He said, we need to socially distance or physically distance, but we need to spiritually connect. We need to stay connected. What often happens is when we get depressed or anxious or overwhelmed, we start to isolate. We start to shut down, and that's what we don't need. Because when you shut down and when you isolate, you start to feel like what you're going through is not normal. You start to feel like there's something wrong with what you're doing. And when you connect, you start to realize that the way that you're dealing with this pandemic is a normal way. We're grieving right now a lot of losses. There's a lot of losses that are associated with this pandemic right now. And the more that we reach out to and connect with our groups and our people, and even there's a lot of grief groups right now on Facebook that you can connect with. You know, the more that we do that, the more that we will realize we're not in this alone. What we're going through is normal, and eventually it's the new normal, and eventually we will get through this. But we can't do it alone. We have to do it with others. Research shows that when you are going through trauma, and this pandemic is trauma, when you're going through trauma, the two things that help the most are peer support, so reaching out to others that are dealing with a similar thing, and adaptive coping skills. So those are the two things we really need right now.
Okay, so adaptive coping skills, what are those?
And I say adaptive because right now what we're seeing is a lot of people that are dealing with this pandemic are drinking too much, eating too much, watching too much pornography. I mean, there's just a lot of excessive behavior going on. So adaptive coping skills are things like moving your body, doing yoga, walking. Walking is big. We've got to not underestimate walking. I mean, people that have got problems with blood pressure and have been bedridden, if you get them up and walk them across the room, you'll see a change immediately.
Yeah, when all started, Heidi, I said to myself, you have to walk every day. You know, my workouts are a way to, I call it my antidepressant, you know, so
Yes.
I wasn't able to go to the gym anymore. And so I thought, all right, every day, 4 miles, which was weird. It just worked out that this loop that I do here, rain or shine, just do it, you know, and my work days are long, but I found that some days it's the last thing I want to do.
Yeah.
I just make sure I get out there, and I never regret it. I always feel better.
Absolutely. So I love what you're saying, because sometimes what we think, Maureen, is you're saying sometimes I don't want to do it. Sometimes what we think is we have to I don't feel good enough to work out. And that's like faulty thinking.
Yeah.
What you should be saying is, I feel so bad that I have to work out.
Right.
Because, you know,
looking at it.
Nobody regrets a workout after it's happened. So yes, we have to put it in our schedule and keep it, because what we do is we get overwhelmed, and we there's a lot that we're doing, and we're like, we don't have time, or we don't feel like it, or we're too tired. I mean, the best way to get energy is to work out. If you're exhausted, go walk.
Yeah.
Do yoga.
And yet, you know, there are people in New York City who, you know, have told me, like, I don't feel comfortable going out because there are enough people still out and about, right? So someone I know started running up and down the stairs in his apartment. And I thought, well, good for you. You know what I mean? You're getting 20, 25 minutes in. So people are, and to your point, doing yoga classes that are available online. And there's lots of workouts that you can do right in your home if you don't feel comfortable or you're not able to leave. So just switching gears a little bit in the context of grief still, one of the things that I just, you know, and we've all seen and read about, and maybe have even been touched by personally, is people we know who have lost a loved one to COVID. And in such a way that, you know, just, I can't even imagine what this would be like to lose a loved one and not be able to be at their side as they're dying, and then not be able to follow through with a burial in the way in which you would, you know, do it, depending on your faith or what your beliefs are, or just your need for some type of ritual. And so I don't know, like, what do you have to say about that? It's just, I can't imagine, like, how does anyone process that, you know, live through that?
I think it's really, really hard right now. And I know they're saying they're bringing iPads into the rooms of people that are dying so that their loved ones can talk to them through the, you know, the internet. It's really hard. You know, I think just talking to them on FaceTime, talking to them on the phone, doing what you can do, having rituals later, you know, eventually when this pandemic is over, coming together, because, you know, people can't mourn. I mean, they can mourn on Zoom, but they can't hug each other and be together and, you know, be in each other's homes, supporting each other after a loss. And like you said, people are dying alone. I mean,
Mhm.
there are nurses and doctors there, and they are amazing. I've seen amazing things that are going on, even though they're overwhelmed. I've seen nurses wearing that are in full gear, full, outfits and masks, etc., that have their photos right here so that patients can see who they are.
Right.
I mean, so they are not with their families, but they're not alone either.
Mhm.
These nurses are and doctors are treating these patients like they're their family members, and they really care about them. But it is really, really hard for the families that can't be with their loved ones. It's really
And
hard.
so for someone who has never had to deal with depression or anxiety or grief, right? And having gone through a loss. In fact, my best friend from college lost her mother just last week.
Wow.
Same thing, she was not able to be with her when she passed. And I don't even think she's begun, obviously, to process all of this. But should someone who's like reach out to get help through this? I mean, typically we would maybe not do that, right? But I don't know. Is it a different type of grief and loss that requires talking to a counselor or?
Um, I think there's going to be some unfinished business and some things that are said at the end of life that maybe weren't able to be said, holding someone at the end of life. So there are going to be things that people are feeling like I got gypped. I didn't get to say goodbye at the end. Even though at the end we usually don't say goodbye, we say I love you because
Right.
we really want to hold on to hope. But as far as support, I think there's compassionate friends groups on Facebook, a lot of them. There's a lot of grief and loss groups on Facebook, which are really powerful to join. And you can reach out to someone like me, definitely. What
Mhm.
I find is sometimes early on in grief, it's very overwhelming to reach out to a therapist. People sometimes wait for several months before they do it. But if you want to do it now and shop, do it now and try it and shop around. I always say shop around for a therapist. If you feel like the first one you're with isn't a good fit, don't go back.
Mhm.
So yes, I think a therapist could be very helpful right now in processing what's gone on because it's very traumatic. It's very traumatic to lose a family member. And on top of that, you've got the pandemic. And on top of that, you weren't able to see them. And now you're not able to get support. So there's so
Yeah.
many layers.
And then the next layer too that I've heard about is the I guess it would be guilt. I would, some people who've had COVID and their parents contracted it as a result of them and thinking, oh, I had it first. And I'm hearing many, many stories about people, then they're losing the parents, because they're older and maybe more immunocompromised. And so I think, oh my gosh, I just can't even begin to imagine what that would be like for someone to take that on, and of course, no blame, but in their heads, they're probably thinking like, if it wasn't for me getting this COVID and now my parents are gone or a parent, I don't know. It's
Maureen, that is something that we are going to see a lot of.
right.
That is the biggest takeaway for me being COVID-19 positive. I have so much shame and guilt. And I don't think that has not been talked about that much. I have shame that I flew across country from New York City in a middle seat, not knowing that's a long flight from New York to Arizona, having no idea that I was COVID positive and brought it to the state. And yes, it was here already, but not in big numbers. I have no idea how many people I infected. I have no idea how long I had it. I live on the 44th floor in Midtown Manhattan. I see a lot of people. I have a lot of I'm constantly running into people, seeing people, in people's lives, etc. So I don't know how many people that I unknowingly infected. And it was unknowingly, but still. And the other thing is I feel guilt that I infected them. Um, I feel guilt that I'm healthy now
Yeah.
and that I'm COVID-19, that I had it and now I don't anymore. That feels very strange. When I go to the supermarket and everyone's wearing masks and afraid to get it, I'm walking around with the mask on thinking I already had it.
Yeah.
They're really trying to avoid people like me. So it's a very complicated thing when you've had it and recovered. And also, like you said, I don't see my parents. I won't go see them because I'm not sure right now. I haven't been able to get a test to make sure that I am no longer positive. I can't get one. So
Mhm.
that's the other thing. So, yes, people are afraid they're going to give their parents this that are elderly. It's very anxiety provoking, like you said, and very guilt provoking.
Yeah. And I know Chris Cuomo, his
Hmm.
son has it now. And, I just read what he was talking about, how it just the pain that he feels knowing, that his son is now suffering.
I didn't know his son had it. I knew his wife did, but I didn't know his son now has it.
Yeah, I
That's
read that
awful.
2 days ago. So I guess, going back to when people don't know what they're grieving for. I mean, in this case, obviously, if you've had a loss, right, that's huge. And then there are lesser forms, but of loss that are happening through this pandemic. But I also feel like they deserve to be given the recognition of, I don't know, processing it, meaning college kids who are saying, gosh, I'm not going to be able to walk, graduation, or I missed my prom, right? And if you look on social media, you see two schools of thought. One is like, oh, come on, there'll be other opportunity, get over it. It's not that big a deal in light of things, at least you're not sick. And I think, that doesn't seem right either. There has to be, an opportunity for them to say, yeah, this kind of really stinks. I worked hard and I wanted this. And so now that's been taken away. So what do you say about that?
I love that you're saying this, because what I'm hearing from clients and my own students at Columbia over and over and over is I don't have the right to my feelings because people have it worse.
Yeah.
People are dying. People have died. And the reality is we have to practice self-compassion. We can only know what we're going through, and we've got to practice self-compassion. Everybody's dealing with a lot of losses right now. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to feel like you said, like, that sucks. It's not fair. I have 2 nephews that are graduating from high school this year. Mm-hmm. They are so sad that they're missing out on prom, all the fun things that you do at the end of senior year. They don't know when they'll see their friends again because they're all going off to college, etc. I mean, it's been a lot. It's been loss after loss after loss. I have students at Columbia that are graduating right now. They won't have a graduation. My nephews won't have a graduation. They don't, they were given a few days to move out of student housing and back home, and out of New York. I mean, there's so many losses now, and it's been really, really hard. We lost the world that we were living in and had no time to prepare for that loss. And we don't know what kind of world we're going into. There's uncertainty there. What will our new world look like post-pandemic? We don't know yet. So there are a lot of losses, and a lot of people that are going through this are young and haven't had great adversity. And this pandemic is something that none of us have been prepared for or are prepared for.
Yeah. And yet, there's opportunity too in crisis, right? To sort of kind of rebuild and rethink and maybe do things just, I don't know, like, hey, who's to say they can't graduate, February of 2021 and do some sort of ceremony where they all get together, right? Because why not?
Absolutely. I think this is an opportunity also, like you're saying, because it is forcing us to start to figure out how to use online platforms more than we ever have, and the internet more than we ever have, and come together in creative ways. And like you said, in the future, we can still have these events and get together and just postpone them. And the other thing is that I think is really important is there's something called post-traumatic growth. And Dr. Tedeschi and Dr. Calhoun out of University of North Carolina have coined this phrase and done research. And what they've found is that we change in profound positive ways after trauma. There's growth, there's post-traumatic growth. And right now what we're going through is an existential crisis. And we are going to come out of it in some ways stronger. And we're going to grow. We're going to appreciate things that we've never appreciated before. I'm going to appreciate going to the store and being able to find toilet paper. There's little things that we've taken for granted. Yeah. We'll appreciate hugging people. We'll appreciate, being able to walk in the park. We'll appreciate those things that we took for granted all these years and our whole life. And we will no longer be doing that. So, this could be a kinder, gentler world at the end, even though right now it doesn't feel like that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I often think, gosh, I hope we don't forget, even about 9/11, like, they say never forget. And so there are things, to your point, that I hope that we take out of this. Even simple things, like I've noticed that when I go do my walk, and I live in the suburbs, so it's a little bit easier. I can, navigate without running into lots of people. But people are making eye contact, more than ever.
I love that.
I can't tell you how many people have said hi, like they're on their bikes or they're running by, and we look at each other and we say hi. And that was like one of the things that I thought, I guess pre-COVID, we go about our day and we were just so with the right. I was guilty of it too, So I don't think I'll come out of this. I mean, I'll come out of this change that I'll just make it a point just to say hi.
I love that. That's big.
Hmm.
Just something as simple as that, connecting to another person. The other thing that I'm seeing, and I really want to give voice to this, is I'm seeing that people are very burned out right now, and their tempers are high and the stress is high. And what I want to say to people, I understand that you're burned out and that you want to go back to your life. You've been sheltered in for a long time, but this is the time more than ever to be supportive of, whether if you're teaching your students, your family. We need to step up. We're at the end of this marathon. We need to finish it and be very supportive and empathic to other people.
Yeah. And so when you say your advice you borrowed from Mr. Rogers to look for the helpers,
Yes.
so talk to
I
me.
think I think that is so important because, we're seeing things that are devastating, and but we've got to also look at all those people that are stepping up and that are helping others, and they're doing little things and are really changing what's going on right now. So there are so many people that have risen to the occasion and been incredible.
Mhm.
I mean, look at all the frontline workers and the delivery people and and even just everyday little things. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of good people in the world. Most people are good people. And there are a lot of people that are doing some pretty amazing things during this pandemic.
Okay. And just to kind of wrap things up, so, this idea of grief, and it can apply again, as we said earlier, to losing a loved one or a grief that's being stirred up in you from a past trauma. Millions of people are losing their jobs, which, grieving like
Yeah.
that loss of being able to take care of one's family, the incredible stress, like having to look for a new job in this crisis. So I guess how would you talk about like giving yourself permission to grieve? What does that look like, and how can you do it in a way that's choosing a positive versus, negative, like the drinking and right. So what would you advise?
Well, I think it's okay to think about all the losses that you had right now.
Hmm.
You're grieving the life you thought you were going to have. It's the death of the life that you knew.
Yeah.
Not to say that there can't be a great life around the corner, 'cause I think there will be. But right now, you're grieving a lot of things, and it's okay to have those feelings, to cry over it, or to be angry over it, or to be anxious about it. I think that's really normal. And I think to validate and acknowledge, hey, this isn't the life I signed up for. This isn't the life I had planned, and this isn't the life I want.
Hmm.
I think those are all, it's fine to feel that way. I think a lot of people, another thing that you can do is journal.
Yeah.
um, Write about what you're dealing with, write about what you're going through. There's been a study done that says that if you are angry or anxious or depressed and you just write about it doesn't even have to be in coherent sentences. Write it on a piece of paper, just get everything out, and then take it and rip it up and throw it in the garbage and just keep doing that. You're kind of purging a lot of things from your body. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and I interviewed him on our Open to Hope podcast, and he talks about trauma and it being trapped in the body. So the more that we can do things to move it out, exercise, writing, journaling, the better. Talking to people, getting support, the better.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Horsley, thank you so much for your time. And for those of you who are watching, if you'd like to get more information, you can go to everydayhealth.com. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Maureen. And I want to say, we always close our Open to Hope show with, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you.